morning. God bless everybody. Good to see everyone here. We're going to be back in Revelation again today. Revelation chapter 12, and we're also going to be jumping back to Daniel chapter 12. Now, we've been doing this Revelation on Revelation series to kind of emphasize how approachable Revelation can be, because a lot of people are intimidated by it, a lot of scary imagery and things like that. A lot of people don't just naturally go to that book. Don't worry, it's not broken. That's supposed to be black. The TV is not messing up on me this time. I'm not going to let it. And where we left off, the two witnesses had died. Now, I wanted to work through every bit by bit. I'm going to skip ahead just slightly and start at chapter 12. Not that the stuff in these passages just before it aren't important. They're very important, and I encourage you to read them. But there's a lot to get through today, so I want to skip just ahead to make sure I can try to fit this all in here. Now, a lot of what I've been doing with these passages in Revelation is connecting them to things that we see today or in recent history. And I want to be very clear up front that nothing I say that connects with today, I'm not saying that I guarantee you that's what this is. I'm just saying these are noticeable things today that should make us be watchful. So, Revelation 12, beginning at verse 1. And, in the last lesson, we talked about both John and Daniel being told to seal up the messages they were given. We were in Revelation 10 and we were in Daniel 12. And they were shown these prophecies, they were shown these visions, and they were told to seal them up until the end. It wasn't for them, it wasn't for people in the meantime, it was for people at the end. Chapter 12, verse 1, Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven, Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his head. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Now, these are the kind of passages I'm talking about, where if people just do a surface reading, it sounds scary, or it sounds intimidating, or something like that. There's this woman's going to have a baby, and a dragon's going to attack. What are they talking about here? Now, traditionally, it's been believed that this woman represents Israel, or perhaps represents God's kingdom in general. It talks about on her head there's a garland of 12 stars, and that's been often believed to be the 12 tribes of Israel, symbolic of that. She gave birth to a male child who will rule all nations with a rod of iron. Jesus came out of Israel, of the nation of Israel. As soon as this child was born, this dragon tried to take it out. What happened when Jesus was born? An evil ruler had all the children killed within a certain age range at that time. Now, something I do want us to notice too is, as we read in verse 119 of Revelation, I believe it was, a lot of stuff in Revelation is either past or present or future, and sometimes more than one of those. So this can be, certain things can be things that have happened, and they can also indicate things to come. And something I want to notice where it talks about a woman clothed with the sun. There's a sign in heaven. Okay, a sign up in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Now, what I'm about to say, this is not by any means, don't take this as I'm like teaching astrology or anything like that. I don't believe in that by any means. But astronomy is a thing. And it even says in the Bible that these stars help us keep track of the seasons and festivals and things like that. It's like a big calendar in the sky. How did the wise men find Jesus? They were wise to prophecy, and they saw something in the heavens that they followed. Now, again, I'm not saying that what I'm about to say is definitely this, but it should make us think a little bit. In 2017, the constellation Virgo, which is a woman in the sky, was in a position where it talks about 12 stars over her head. The constellation Leo was right above its head, and there were 3 planets mixed in so that it was basically 12 stars above her head. At that time, the sun was in the middle of Virgo. She was clothed with the sun. Things like this. This is not the first time in history that this has happened. It's happened sporadically throughout many, many years in the past at different times, hundreds or thousands of years apart. But when you keep in mind all the things that make today's world seem more and more like we're getting closer to the end times, it almost seems like maybe that is something to indicate that we should be watchful at least. So now, I want to notice something in verse 6 here. It says, "Then the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days." So this is kind of a curious thing let's just keep that in the back of our mind for a moment and skip back to Daniel. If I can turn my pages without ripping them, that'd be great. Daniel chapter 12, and go down to verse 8. "Although I heard, I did not understand. Then I said, 'My Lord, what shall be the end of these things?' And he said, 'Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end.'" So just to recap what we talked about before, Daniel was given this prophecy and told not to write certain things about the prophecy. Hold on to this. It's not for the people yet. It's for the people at the end. Verse 10, "Many shall be purified, made white, and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from that time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days." So we just heard something about 1,260 days. Now we're hearing 1,290 days. What's this passage saying? I think it's saying that, when this end time does come, that it's time for this to be unsealed. It says, "The wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand." God's going to be at work unfolding things and making things new. And there's a lot of wicked people in this world. They're going to be brought to justice, and they're going to be blind to it. They're not going to understand, as this says, but the wise shall understand. And if we're watchful, we may see things like that happening. But it's talking about from the time the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. And then goes on, verse 12, "Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days." Or if you've got King James, it says 1,305 and 30, which is the same thing, 1335 basically. "But you go your way till the end, for you shall rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of days." Now, what did we talk about before about days in prophecy? At times it's symbolic of years. So whereas you would hear 1,260 days, that can mean 1,260 years. 1,290, 1,335. What do these things mean? It talks in verse 11. "And from that time the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, and there shall be 1,290 days." What is this abomination of desolation? If you read that in the King James Version, it words it a little bit differently. It says, an abomination which maketh desolate. It's in reference to something at some point in time happening as an abomination to God that is going to, what's desolation? It's nobody's there. It's referencing, well, if you just Google it, say, what is the abomination of desolation, or the abomination which maketh desolate? You'll see a lot of different things, but the main thing that you'll probably see is a guy named Antiochus Epiphanes. And this is what I was taught in school. And I don't believe this story is it, but it's possible that it's it. Antiochus Epiphanes was a king of Syria. And in 167 BC, so like 163 or 4 years before Jesus was born, he had captured Jerusalem, 167 BC. And he went to God's temple and sacrificed pigs to Zeus in the temple of the one true God. Many people believe that that is the abomination that tainted God's temple, that caused desolation. But 1,290, 1,335, that's a long time. And this was just 163, 4 years before Jesus was born. We have scripture on when Jesus walked the earth. Were people worshiping at the temple in and around his days? It wasn't desolate then. So it's possible that that's what it's in reference to. Maybe that is what it's in reference to. And maybe that literally was just days. And the people came back to worship and the desolation was over before Jesus came back. I think there's other possibilities. The math would put this, if this was years and what he did was the abomination of desolation, then that would put its end at about the 12th century, over 1,000 years after Jesus was crucified. Anybody know what this is? Specifically. I say Rhea knows what it is. This is called the Dome of the Rock. And I'm not going to even try to maneuver the cameras for this week's after all the hassle we had last time with it working right. If you're home watching the video and you'd like to see this, Google Dome of the Rock. And Rhea, where did you see this? It's in Israel. Yeah, it's in Jerusalem. This was built in 688. The construction began in the year 688. Okay? And inside this mosque, there are inscriptions on the walls. Let me tell you what they say. Well, there's a lot in there, but one of the things it does is it talks about views on Jesus. It says that he was a prophet, but not a Messiah. The son of Mary, but not the Son of God. And there's direct quotes. This Messiah, Jesus, the son of Mary, was only a messenger of God. And his word, which he conveyed unto Mary, and a spirit from him. So believe in God and his messengers, and say not three. Cease. Another inscription says, God is only one God. Far be it removed from his transcendent majesty that he should have a son. Another inscription says, there is no God but God. He is one. Praise be to God, who hath not taken unto himself a son, and who hath no partner in the sovereignty. So here we have this building that has inscriptions denying the deity of Jesus, denying that Jesus is the Son of God, denying that God has a son at all. Here's an overhead view of the Dome of the Rock. And if you are at home and obviously can't see this, Google overhead view, Dome of the Rock. Everybody see this platform it's on? This big concrete slab? Well, it looks awful big for that little building. Does anybody know what that is? That's where the temple was. That's the floor of God's temple. God's temple has been torn down, and a building has been put there in its place. It has in writing that Jesus is not the Son of God. That Jesus has no deity. He is not God. Just a good guy. Would you call that an abomination more than killing a pig? Do you think there's a lot of Jews going there to worship? No, it's caused desolation. God's temple's not there. An ungodly one is there. So, we've got this date. This abomination of desolation is set up, and there shall be 1,290 days. Well, let's imagine or let's assume that is 1,290 years. Well, we've also got another number of 1,335 years. And maybe we can kind of go off, it says from the time that this abomination of desolation is set up. We've got a couple numbers, but can we really figure out what these dates might be or what they might mean? Maybe it would help if we had a third date, like in Revelation, 1,260 days that the people would be in the wilderness. So, again, I'm not saying that this is the abomination of desolation, but it sure looks like it to me. When was that built? 688. So let's start doing some math. Revelation 12:6. Then the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So let's do some math here. 688 plus 1,260, 1948. Did anything happen in 1948? 1948, Israel became a nation once again. And these Jews, God's people, finally had a home to return to from the wilderness, from being scattered from their homeland. So let's go back here. We got another number. Let's do some more math. What's 688 plus 1,290 days back in Daniel? From the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Well, until what? Something happened. We just went to 1,260. What happened? When's 1,290? 688 plus 1,290 is 1978. Did anything significant happen in 1978 for these people? In 1978, something very big happened for them. Even though they had their homeland again, they could come home, they weren't in the wilderness, they weren't safe. The moment they went back there, they started coming under attack. They started being attacked and invaded by all these surrounding nations: Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. Their surrounding nations were attacking and invading them, and even the people that weren't right next to them, they were giving help. Saudi Arabia was helping out, Yemen was helping out, Sudan was helping out. So they came home in 1948, but they were in big trouble until 1978. In 1978, there was something called the Camp David Accords. Now, the Camp David Accords were a peace treaty. Now, I think anybody who's ever turned on the news ever knows that Israel is not at peace and has not been at peace completely for a while. But what this treaty did, it was a treaty between Israel and Egypt. And Egypt was a very powerful nation that was involved in every single major invasion of Israel. Take Egypt out of the equation and it changes things. Every single invasion of them at that time, from 48 until 78, involved Egypt. And now that there's a peace treaty with them, things have changed. They still got conflicts, there's still things happening, there's still, battles that they face, but since that year right there has not been a single war within their borders. They've been safe within their borders. They got to go home in 48. They were safe inside that home since 78. It brought, that verse didn't say what was going to happen then, but we see something big happening then. It brought a lasting peace within the walls of Israel that's still going on today. That's almost 50 years. Daniel 12:12. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. So what's going to happen at 1,335 days? Blessed is he. Some kind of blessing for those who make it to that point. So let's do some more math. What's 688 plus 1,335? What happened that year? Oh, it hasn't happened yet. That's next year. That's 2023. What's going to happen? Blessed is he who waits and comes to these 1,335 days. Will that be the end of this abomination of desolation? Will it come down? Maybe, maybe not. And I believe it was the 80s, there were some Jewish people that tried to bomb it and take it down, and they were busted and arrested, and it didn't come to fruition. Will something else amazing happen? Well, I don't think it's going to be necessarily the return of Jesus, because what's the Bible say about that? Yeah. No one knows. No one knows when that's going to be. Not even the Son, only the Father knows when he's coming. So I doubt that God would put anything in Scripture that would help us to figure out the date Jesus is coming back, because he's a lot smarter than I am. He'd have figured it out long before me. But maybe this prophecy isn't talking about the dome at all. Maybe that has nothing to do with the abomination of desolation. Maybe it's something entirely different. But if the dome is what this prophecy is talking about, and if these numbers are what it seems like they could mean, then something big is coming. Something big next year. I don't like pointing out dates that haven't happened yet. I really don't. Because when that happens, you end up having nothing happening on Y2K, you have nothing happening in 2012, you have nothing happening, Can't tell you how many times I've survived the end of the world. We're some resilient people, aren't we? But if this is true, and something big is coming in the form of a blessing, I don't, 1,335 years is a long time to wait for a big dud to happen. I don't know why you even bother putting that in Scripture if that's what that is and that's the case. But again, these are things to just be mindful of. With all these past sermons we've done on this, we've seen a lot of symbolic signs and things that just seem to kind of point to this era without outright saying it. And I think God works that way a lot of times, because, if he just said, this is what I'm going to do on this date, and this is what I'm going to do on this date, this is what I'm going to do on this date, it takes faith out of the equation. We just, we're not hoping and waiting. We'd just all be acting like idiots until 2032 or whatever date he told us. And again, one thing that my favorite thing about the unsuredness of when these things may come to pass, when the end will come, when when God is going to come and break down and restore this world. My favorite thing is that, aside from the fact that we don't know exactly when it's coming, Satan doesn't know exactly when it's coming. And he's going to get hit with a sucker punch so hard. He knows it's coming. He just doesn't know exactly when and how. We just need to be watchful and mindful and be prepared. The end could come at the end of this service. It could come 3 weeks from now. It might come in 4,000 years. But we need to live like it's coming soon. And we need to trust that it may come soon. And we just need to be watchful.